Hi, everyone. It's Cole Murphy's dad again. Uh, Going to read or pick up from where his grandmother left off on the chocolate touch. I'm going to try to get through as much as I can today. And then I think his mom is hopefully going to make her video and finish the book so that none of you have to deal with going home for the summer not knowing what happened in the chocolate touch. We wouldn't do that to you. So, without further ado, I'm going to start with chapter 7, which is where, like I said, Cole's grandmother left off, and I'm going to bang through as much of this as I can. All right, boys and girls, Ms. Plimsoll said, it's almost time for lunch. Clear up your things. Paint pots securely closed, brushes washed, paintings unpinned and laid out to dry, drawing boards stacked against the wall. Ah, there's the bell. Front row first. Timothy leading, then Robin in a single file. Now go. John, alone, walked slowly in the throng, hurrying along the corridors to the school cafeteria. The school was proud of the cafeteria and the food that was served in it. The room was spacious and bright, with windows all the way along one side overlooking the playground and playing fields beyond. The opposite side was wholly taken up by the shiny silver service counter. Several boys and girls were already settled at tables by the time John took his place in line. Enviously, John noticed a boy at a nearby table suck at straws dipped in a milk bottle that was dull with frost. A lot of detail. John could imagine the refreshing taste of cold, creamy milk. At another table, a group of girls were eating fat red cherries. John could almost feel the firm fruit on his tongue and the pleasure of biting through the juicy pulp and tartness. The cherries must taste good. They must be thirst-quenching. John unhappily took a tray from the pile and slid it along the rails in front of the top of the counter. He put a paper napkin, a glass, and a gleaming spoon, a knife, and a fork on the tray. It seemed hardly worth the while, but he felt that he might as well try the food and drink. Perhaps if I eat a different way, without letting anything touch my lips, he muttered, my lunch won't all change to chocolate. What a problem, right? He was not very hopeful. What? Asked the boy standing to him. Nothing, John said. I thought I heard you say something about chocolate, the boy said. I hope this is the day for chocolate cream pie, he added. That'd be super. On chocolate cream pie days of the past, John had been known to skip the main course so that he might spend all his lunch money on dessert. The thought of 4 pieces of chocolate cream pie now suddenly made his stomach feel as though he were on a roller coaster, an uneasy, flibberty-gibberty sensation. John shuddered. Ookie, he mentioned, wrinkling up his nose. The other boy shrugged his shoulders and started to choose his meal. John took a plate of cold chicken and ham, potato chips, and a crisp, moist lettuce and tomato salad. The white of the chicken and the pink of the ham, the gold of the potatoes, the pale green of the lettuce, and the red of the tomato looked delicious. He also took a half pint of milk, a thick-crusted whole wheat roll, and a cool pat of butter, a tumbler of water with ice cubes clinking against the glass, and a dish of fresh fruit. This does not sound like any lunch I've ever had at school. Sorry. Slices of orange and grapefruit and bananas and grapes. John's tray was loaded with just the sort of meal his mother was always trying to persuade him to eat. Until today, John had always thought it was pretty dull to eat sensible things. Why eat sweeter things when there were sweeter food and drink to be had? Today, however, the sensible things looked most appetizing, and his mouth began to water in its new sticky way. John paid for the lunch with the money his mother had given him. He went to an empty table and he sat down. His fingers trembling slightly with eagerness, he cut a slice of lettuce. His fork went through the leaves with a promising crunch. That's him at the table. He stuck the prongs of the fork into a mouth-sized piece of lettuce and carefully inserted it into his mouth. The lettuce didn't touch his wide-stretched lips. John's teeth came together on crisp layers of sweet chocolate. He took a small piece of potato chip, tilted back his head until he was looking straight up at the ceiling, and he dropped the morsel straight down into his throat, trying to avoid his lips. He felt it go down, a sharp fragment of sweet chocolate. He tried the milk, the ice water, the fruit. Every solid and liquid that he sampled was transformed as soon as it entered his mouth. Then he became aware of a shocking novelty that he hadn't noticed at breakfast. At the rim of each glass, there was a small semicircle of opaque brown. The bowl of his spoon and the prongs of his fork had become brown. As John watched, horrified, the areas of magic chocolate slowly spread until at least the glasses and cutlery were all solid chocolate. The trouble was unquestionably growing worse. John's scalp tightened with fear. What am I going to do? He asked himself miserably. Oh dear, what is going to happen to me? Leaving his tray of chocolate food and drink and utensils, John stumbled away from the cafeteria and out to the playground. Wow. Poor John. English class passed without incident. Miss Plimsoll distributed word lists for her pupils to take home. The more words you know, she explained as always, the more exactly you can think. There were some difficult new words, John noticed. Avarice, indigestion, acidity, unhealthiness, moderation, digestibility. As Miss Plimsoll explained the meaning of each one, it seemed to John as though they all had a special bearing on his present uncomfortable condition. At last the bell rang. Very well, class, Miss Plimsoll said. Time for outside activities. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Miss Plimsoll, they all said. Miss Plimsoll gave the signal for dismissal, and the pupils in the front row filed out, followed by those in the second row, including John and Susan. John played a violin in the school orchestra, and usually she and John went to the rehearsals in the auditorium together. This time, Susan hurried on ahead of him, and John followed very slowly. The members of the orchestra were sitting at their music stands on the auditorium stage when John, carrying his dark blue trumpet case, got to his chair in the brass section. Mrs. Quaver had already begun to explain a difficult passage to the girl who played the flute. Just after Jay sings, nestlings chirp and flee, she was saying, you come in with your trill, doodle, oodle, 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 oo. Do you see the place on your score? Good. I don't know what any of that means. Ah, John, Mrs. Quaver exclaimed, seeing him in his place. I'm glad you're not absent. As I have told the others, this afternoon we're having a first joint rehearsal of my arrangement called A Boy's Song by James Hogg. We've been over all the individual parts and all the sections, you will recall. Now it's time to fit the pieces together. John nervously opened his trumpet case and took his shining golden trumpet from its bed of scarlet velvet. The beautiful new instrument gave him confidence. He worked the valves nimbly with his fingers and looked up at Mrs. Quaver again. Now, John, she said, tell me when your little solo begins. Right after the end of the second verse, John promptly replied. He had practiced his part every evening in the basement at home for the last 2 weeks. He knew every note perfectly. After the line, that's the way for Billy and me, Good, Mrs. Quaver said. And don't forget what I told you, John. This is a happy song. I want you to play ta-ta, 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 simply repeating the rhythm of the voice. And I want you to be light and lively. This is supposed to be the song of a boy who loves romping in the country. Who doesn't love to romp in the country? Ta-ta, 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 John thought. That shouldn't be too difficult, even with the whole orchestra listening to him. He had played it over and over again at home, but he would have to try extra hard here. This was his first ever solo. Everyone else was depending on him to play it properly. Right, said Mrs. Quaver brightly. With her baton, she rapped twice sharply on the music stand before her. All the musicians brought their instruments into playing position. Susan poised her bow over the strings of her violin. John held his trumpet close to his mouth and wiggled his fingers on the valves. Mrs. Quaver's baton moved from side to side and then up and down. The cymbals clashed and the drums thumped. The pianist brought his fingers down on the ivory keys of the piano, and the violinists and cellists made their wheeling and whooping sounds. All were in perfect unison. The rehearsal had begun. After the introduction, one of the older boys began to sing. Where the pools are bright and deep, where the gray trout lies asleep, up the river and over the lay, that's the way for Billy and me. After the last line of the verse, John's fellow trumpeter echoed the rhythm of the singer's voice. Ta-ta, 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 ta-ta. Mrs. Quaver smiled approvingly at the successful performance, and with her baton, gave the singer the signal to begin the second verse. Where the blackbird sings the latest, an oboe went peep. Where the hawthorn blooms the sweetest, where the nestlings chirp and flee, the flute warbled according to plan. That's the way for Billy and me. You guys didn't think you were going to get to hear me sing today, did you? Well, neither did I. John swallowed with an effort to put the mouthpiece of his trumpet to his lips for his solo. The mouthpiece instantly changed to chocolate. Then, almost as fast, the chocolate spread along the instrument, changing all the flashing gold into dull brown. The first note came out fairly true, ta, but chocolate trumpets cannot withstand much pressure. The hole in the mouthpiece softened and clogged up, and the valves stuck as John desperately tried to finish his part. Mrs. Quaver's eyes almost popped out of her head. Ta 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 ta. It sounded as though John were trying to play a soap-filled bubble pipe. Terribly flustered, he put down his trumpet. Mrs. Quaver was speechless. The orchestra was rocked by uproarious laughter. The other trumpeter leaned over towards John's chair and picked up the trumpet. "It's a chocolate trumpet," he shouted derisively. "No wonder it sounded like that." John Midas was trying to play a chocolate. John didn't want to hear any more. He fled from the stage and out to the playground. Without stopping even to look around, he ran through the stone gateway and ran home. This is him running out. Getting out of Dodge. Okay. Chapter 9. I'm going to leave this for my wife, Cole's mom, because I think she can get through this whole thing, and I'm just up in about 15 minutes here, so I don't want to get in the middle of a chapter and then have her start a different one. Okay, I'm going to stop here. She's going to pick up from here, and when she's done, you're going to know what happened with John and the chocolate touch. Okay, bye everybody. Have a great summer.